Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I have got a really fascinating individual to introduce you to tonight. Elizabeth White is her name. She's a classmate of mine from Harvard Business School, and she wrote a really interesting book. You know, a lot of us are thinking about sort of that Freedom 55 kind of attitude, and Elizabeth wrote a personal, controversial book called 55 Unemployed and Faking Normal. And it became really quite the rage. She's written numerous different other articles about aging. And so I thought it would be great to check in with her and find out about the book and what she's doing and some of these articles and what we need to be doing to think about this coming demographic tsunami, some people have described, of baby boomers all getting into their senior years. So Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. I'm thrilled to be here. And
I'm thrilled to see you again.
Yeah.
So tell me, if you could, 55 Underemployed and Faking Normal. How did you come to write a book like that?
So I was someone who was doing really well until I wasn't, so I have, as you know, all the props and credentials, Harvard MBA. I have an MA from Johns Hopkins in International Studies. I worked at the World Bank, been an entrepreneur, a C-suite executive, all of that. And in my mid 50s, right after the Great Recession of 2008-9, lost two big consultancies. Both companies retrenched, and I was out of work. Not worried because of that background I have, and found that my phone wasn't ringing. And I was speaking to a few women friends. One was an Emmy Award winning producing person, and she wasn't getting work, few other people not getting work. And at a point of real despair, actually, I wrote an essay describing what it's like to land here. When you or suddenly feel like your face is pressed up against a window and you're looking in at a world that you don't belong to and maybe won't get back. And that essay made its way onto the PBS Facebook page. And within a day, thousands and thousands of people responded saying, "This is me, this is my sister, my husband. Why aren't we having this conversation?" So of course I have the background to look at the data. And what I saw was that there are millions of Americans, middle-class Americans, as we are living longer and fitter lives, who don't have the $2 million set aside to maintain their current standard of living well into their 80s. Because what we know is if you make it to 60 in reasonably good health, you're going to live well into your 90s. So it's quite different than when life expectancy was maybe 70 and you retired at 65 and you only had to put 5 years together. Now, many Americans, many people are having to put 20 or 25 years together, and we're not prepared for that. So that's how the book was born, from that essay. Yes.
And you first self-published the book, I understand, and then Simon & Schuster came knocking?
Yep, self-published the book when it was easy to do with Amazon, got a fair amount of traction with the book, and had an opportunity to pitch it to Simon & Schuster. They said, "We can get you distribution that you can't get on your own." So I then redid the book in 2019, and it's just been going since then, different opportunities opening up since, what was that now, 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, well, congratulations. That's fantastic. So tell me, Elizabeth, why do you think this has happened? Is this the Great Recession? Is it ageism? Is it, some of these people that commented about middle America missing out and the coast doing well? Like, what's the cause of this? If you're saying this impacted you and lots of other people identified with it.
I actually think longevity, the new longevity, is right up there with climate change as a sort of grand challenge. So, as we are living longer and fitter lives, it has implications for everything. So, if you graduate at 22 or 27, but you're going to live well into your 80s, certainly that education that you got there is not going to carry you all the way through. It has implications for housing. Most of the housing in the US was built at a time when nuclear families, that was sort of the predominant household type.
Yep.
Now that is the minority. So you've got all these houses with a giant master bedroom and two little kiddie rooms. And so even as a group of older adults wanted to live together, it's just not suitable. It has all kinds of meaning then right now, even when you think of, how financial institutions think of retirement. It's a sort of one-way exit out at 65, and then you're playing golf. There are many Americans who are having to continue to work well into their 70s to make ends meet. So it just has so many implications, thanks to advances in science and medicine. We have millions of people living longer. And we're not having the kind of conversation. As I was telling you, I turn 70 in December coming, and I am not my grandmother. I just, as I was telling
You
you,
sure don't look 70.
and this is the new age that we're in. And we're sort of, kind of in a time warp where we view older people as, ready for the rocking chair and kind of all of this. And we really need a huge, a very different paradigm. And it's really
Yet at the same time,
Yeah.
and I don't want to get too political,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you've got two candidates that are in their late 70s, if not going to be into their 80s, running for president of the United States.
We're going to see more and more of this, I think. And, I learned something recently and was really struck by this, that genetics only determines, I think, a maximum of something like 20% of our health outcomes. So that means that even for young people, the longevity is important. That they can do a lot of things. There's, social determinants that will certainly influence how well they age. So when I'm making the point that longevity is not just a conversation for old people.
Right. Do you think ageism exists?
Absolutely, it does. Because we live in that old paradigm where when I say I'm not my grandmother, right now you say 70, you say 65, and people have, definitely a concept in their mind of what that is. And there are a lot of stereotypes that go with that. So, and the thing is, older adults, right now, we're already a third of the workforce in the US is 55 and older. It's already.
Really? Seriously, a third of the workforce in the United States is 55 or older.
Yeah. And we're not having the conversations about what does that mean for people to be in the workforce longer. Even if you are in work that is physically demanding, there are other countries that have done much better than we have in terms of, having technology that makes it easier to lift and bend and that kind of thing, so that people who are even on doing more blue collar work can stay in the workforce longer. And we're just, I would say, generally not having this kind of conversation.
Well, in Canada, we're having conversations about how we're going to house people, healthcare expenses, long-term support for the elderly, et cetera. And, different people that I've interviewed have called it a coming tsunami that we're not prepared for, as both the the expense is going to increase fairly dramatically and we've got a different healthcare system than you do in the United States, but from a healthcare standpoint, and I think the statistic is 80% of your lifetime healthcare expenditure in Canada is incurred in the last 18 months of life, and so it's a huge healthcare expense. And I interviewed one person from a long-term care standpoint who said that there's just absolutely no way we could build institutional housing to house the aged in the coming decades. And so staying at home or in homes is the only possible solution. We got to figure out a way of getting care to people where they live. And then finally, that we're going to go from a situation where we had 5 people working for every one person that was retired to 2 people working for every one person that was retired. And when you think about that from a pension standpoint, a tax standpoint, a healthcare standpoint, a long-term care support standpoint, the impact on government funding, government revenue, government deficits is incredible. And we're just not thinking about it and being prepared for it.
And I think I've never embraced or liked the tsunami sort of metaphor, because it's sort of like, oh my God, we're going to be overrun with all these unproductive, elderly, frail people. It's just going to be terrible. And I think the truth is, when I look around, you're just a few years behind me. When you look around at the people that there is a lot of capacity there. There's a lot of, I think, possibility of looking at this as an opportunity to rethink longevity, to move out of a 1950s model of what it means to be an older person. And so yes, the healthcare, because we don't deal with prevention. So, the statistic you quoted about all the costs being at the end is because we're not focusing on young people. If the data says that 20% of health outcomes are only 20% of health outcomes are genetically determined, that means all the rest of it is how we live, eat, etc. So that means things can be done much earlier to make someone who's 30 now to make their 60s better. And I think those are the kinds of conversations that we're not having. We're sort of focused on the burden of it, the cost of it. This is terrible. But there are now people, particularly the Stanford folks, MIT folks, who are thinking about, in terms of lifespan, thinking about what are the opportunities that come with living longer.
We're chatting tonight with Elizabeth White, the author of 55, Underemployed and Faking Normal, a book that sounds like it's something that we all should be considering if we're in that sort of 50 and over age group. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back. And I'm going to ask Elizabeth to read a section from it that talks about her own personal story, which I understand is quite interesting and impactful, and maybe talk about some of the things that she's currently doing in regards to supporting people in their years after 55. Stay with us, everyone. Back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is a classmate of mine from Harvard Business School, where we both sat for 2 years, and we were in the same class for a full year and interacted day in and day out. And I got to tell you that Elizabeth White was one of the smartest, most articulate people that I had the pleasure of meeting, and we ended up socializing a bunch together. And I got to tell you, she's very impressive and very kind and very smart, etc. And she's got an incredible background. In addition to an MBA from Harvard, she's got a Master's of Arts, an MA in International Global Studies from Johns Hopkins, and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Oberlin College. She, as she mentioned, has got an incredible career. She, when I met her, was working at the World Bank, and then she was working with BlackBerry, and then she was working with Calvert Group as a senior diversity advisor to the president. She was a senior advisor to president and chief strategic buyer of Linkages program, a consultant on market access with USAID, a consultant with an international trade center, a chief operating officer of Africare. And I think we chatted at that point in time, and you showed me a bunch of the goods that you were importing that were really quite impressive. And a store that I think you opened that was retailing some of those products. You were a senior consultant with Vital Voices Global Partnership and a consultant advisor to the executive director of Senior Service America, Inc. And as I mentioned, author of 55 Underemployed and Faking Normal. Faking Normal. Why were you faking normal, Elizabeth?
The faking normal is about in a country where the focus is on rugged individualism, you don't talk about when you are struggling. You pretend you're okay when you're not okay. And there are a lot of Americans who are struggling now and not okay. And so it's this sort of pretending that a lot of people are doing. And I wanted to acknowledge that. I saw it in myself and I saw it now, people write me privately and tell me what's really going on with them. And that's why I had that faking normal in the title.
Can you read something from the book for us, please?
I'm going to read the essay that sort of launched it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you'll get a sense of it. It's called You Know Her. You know her. She is in your friendship circle, hidden in plain sight. Her clothes are still impeccable, bought in the good years when she was still making money. To look at her, you would not know that her electricity was cut off last week for non-payment, or that she meets the eligibility requirements for food stamps. But if you paid attention, you would see the sadness in her eyes, hear that hint of fear in her otherwise self-assured voice. These days, she buys the $1.99 trial-size jug of Tide to make ends meet. You didn't know laundry detergent came in that size. You invite her to the same expensive restaurants that the two of you have always enjoyed, but she orders mineral water now with a twist of lemon instead of that $18 glass of Chardonnay. She is frugal in her menu choices, meticulous, counting every penny in her head. She demurs, dividing the table bill evenly to cover desserts, designer coffees, and second and third glasses of wine she did not consume. She is tired of trying to keep up appearances. Faking normal is wearing her out. There are no media stories about her. Her slide out of the middle class is not sensational enough. A friend says that she's broke, not poor, and that there is a difference. She lives without cable, her gym membership, or nail appointments. She discovered that she can do her own hair. She has no retirement savings, no nest egg. She exhausted that long ago. There is no expensive condo from which to draw equity, and no husband to back her up. Months of slow pay and no pay have decimated her credit. Bill collectors call her constantly, reading verbatim from a script, expressing polite sympathy for her plight before demanding payment arrangements she can't possibly meet. Friends wonder privately how someone so well educated could be in economic freefall. She is still as talented as ever and as smart as a whip, but work is sketchy now, mostly on and off consulting gigs. Friends hear about this and that assignment, but can't remember when she had a real job. At 55, she has learned how to fake cheeriness and to appear to be engaged, but her phone doesn't ring with opportunities anymore. She doesn't remember exactly when it stopped, but she cannot deny now having entered the uncertain world of formerly and used to be. In the face of mega-generational shifts, she's not sure anymore where she belongs. What she does know is that dozens of online job applications seem to disappear into a black hole. She's convinced that employers have set their online job recruitment algorithms to reject anyone who graduated before 1995. She wonders what is to become of her. She is facing a work for life proposition. So far, her health has held up, but her body aches, or is it her spirit? Homeless women used to be invisible to her, but she appraises them now with curious eyes. wondering if their story started like hers.
What a section. Thank you for sharing that with us. What do you think the learning of this is? Obviously, we need to do things that I think you're going to tell us about in regards to housing, elderly people, and healthcare and pensions and things like that. But if someone's in that kind of a situation at 55, what caused that? And if lots of people were in that, what is it? Is it, as we talked about earlier, is it the Great Recession? Is it the loss of manufacturing jobs? Is it ageism? What causes that? There have been numerous, at least I haven't read it recently, but after the election of Donald Trump in 2016, there were numerous articles about a whole sort of part of society that felt left behind. Is there a whole part of society in the United States that feels left behind and is left behind?
Yeah, so we know from some really good work that the Urban Institute and ProPublica did that nearly half of Americans will lose their jobs in their 50s, for various reasons, and that only 10% of those who lose their jobs ever again get a job commensurate in pay and status with the job that they left. So that's a lot of people.
That's a huge. So 50% in their 50s lose their job and only 10% regain similar positions. So 40% are in precarious employment, gig economies, contracts or something like that.
Contracts are, now some are coming out for health reasons. There are a variety of reasons, but that is the data. So when you lose your job in your 50s, I definitely believe ageism, and if you're in tech and some other industries, it starts earlier, it becomes very hard to kind of get back in. So I often say that that older person you see bagging groceries at Trader Joe's or someone at the front desk in your gym is probably not there because that's where they want to be. So that's, so ageism. And I am, when I think about companies who don't have policies for integrating older adults, advancing older adults, retaining older adults, the truth is, I don't remember sort of the exact, I can't pull but it's a big number what we're spending on, and in fact, in categories like automobiles, like apparel, etc., we're probably more than a third to half of all of the expenditures. So what I think about is, if older adults who have this tremendous financial clout, because there are 77 million boomers, if we're not working, if we start hitting the brakes on our spending, because I don't have to go on vacation, I don't have to buy clothes, I don't have to eat in restaurants, it starts to impact businesses in a way that I think they're not anticipating. When you talk to younger people who are also in your companies, who have a mom who is just living on Social Security, they also have the stress of that. In my book, I interviewed someone who, her 4 children, adult children, asked her, "Mom, what is your retirement plan?" She said, "My retirement plan is you." So it is a problem that goes across generations. Right now in the US, we have 4 generations in the workforce, from, my age, our age, all the way to people in their early 20s. So the model that we used to have, the one-way exit at 65, people dying in their early 70s, not living fitter life. So, a lot of people are managing their chronic conditions with medication. It's not that they don't have them, but they're still kind of out and about in a way that they weren't when our parents and grandparents were a similar age. And we just haven't changed our lens in terms of how we're looking at this. And we're going to be forced to. One, boomers
No
are the
question.
first.
No
What did you
question.
say?
Go ahead.
Right. But boomers are the first one up this hill, and we're just not taking it. We're all elbows and knees on this of being treated like we are our grandparents. But we're just first up the hill. Behind us are the Gen Xers right there, and then behind them, millennials who are even more numerous than we are. So I think we're in this period of tremendous change. And I like to frame it in terms of looking at the opportunities of this period, because it's going to keep going. Half the children who are 5 right now are going to live to 100.
Till 100.
To 100. So we've got to be thinking about what does that mean in terms of housing, education, healthcare.
Should the retirement age be increased?
I think that we should be looking at it, rather than the one-way exit. Maybe so let me say a couple of things. So when we talk about it to 100, a lot of times we like to add the years on at the end. It may mean when you're living to 100 that adolescence goes to 35.
Well, there's a lot of people that think it does right now.
Right.
In fact, there was a book I read recently that I interviewed someone on called the 20s are the most important decade, and people are squandering it because they're treating it like an extension of adolescence rather than the decade where, when you and I were in our 20s, you got married, you got your first house, you got your jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So the 20s today is a very different decade than it was 50 years ago.
And when you extend lifespan to 100, it's going to be different still. So thinking about what does it mean to have 100-year life? That's the question. And then sort of looking at all the aspects of it. And right now, if I don't even use terms like elderly, I don't use, because they connote for people sort of an old paradigm.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in inviting us to consider what the future could look like without the sort of ageist stereotypes that we are just, kind of very accustomed to.
Let me wait for a minute and go through some of the issues, but come back to your comment about 50% of the people in their 50s losing their jobs and 40% of them not getting new full-time jobs, only 10% of them getting new full-time jobs. What is that? You think about how knowledgeable they must be, how skilled they must be, the wisdom that they've developed over their career, and a career of probably 20 to 25 years. Why are we squandering that in society, in our corporations? Why are we not hiring people that are 55 years old?
I think because we live in a country that is youth obsessed. That is where all the advertising dollars are spent. That is the focus. Youth is considered better than anything else. And some of the most ageist people are actually people our age. The people I have had, people, our contemporaries who see me coming and pull up the drawbridge. The ageism is so deep that it's not just young people doing it. We do it to ourselves as well. And the thing that I'm inviting us to consider is that when people were dying, in their early 70s, that when you then retired at 65, you really, little time with your grandkids, a little fishing, a little whatever you did, and then you were done.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case. And so we are trying to figure out, what do we do with all these additional years? How can the wisdom and talent and knowledge and experience that you talk about be utilized? How can, and you have, my friends, Mark Friedman, Chip Conley, who's are really looking at how Chip has the, Modern Elder Academy and the making of the Modern Elder, really looking at how do we as older adults work with younger people? How can we join forces and create this new future?
Well, we're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes with Elizabeth White and talk about how we create that new future and some of the other things that we've got to do and some of the articles that she's written about some of these other things that we got to do to deal with maybe not this coming tsunami, if that's the wrong verbiage, but this coming demographic change, because it's going to be huge. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Elizabeth White, who is a author of 55 Underemployed and Faking Normal, published by Simon & Schuster. And it's really quite a provocative book. It's an age solution. She is an age solutions advocate for older adults facing uncertain work and financial insecurity. And when she could not find a book that met her needs during her own bout of long-term unemployment, she wrote it herself. She wrote it as a 62-year-old woman who had lived the story she describes as a Harvard MBA, former retail entrepreneur, and a C-suite executive who never expected to land there, as we talked about. She's become a frequent guest blogger and speaker at TEDx and TED, and has appeared in publications like Barron's, Forbes, the Huffington Post, Market Watch, Next Avenue, and the Washington Post. She's been on PBS, and her TEDx talk has garnered over 2 million views. Again, Elizabeth, welcome to the show. I've got to ask you about some of these articles that you've written because they're really quite interesting. You want to have a presidential envoy on aging, longevity, and retirement security. And you said there, and we talked about some of these statistics earlier in the show, that you think that it's as important an issue as climate change. Really?
Yes. When you have half the children right now going to live to 100 and all the things that we've talked about, it is a, paradigm shift of a magnitude that I think we are not grappling with. And I think it needs leadership at the top that's really looking not just the next 4 years into the next election, but really looking into the future, the next 50 years. What will it look like? And what is the role, that government can play? I think about, for example, my father, who was a career officer in the Army. And the way that he got into the Army was because President Truman integrated the Army. And that integration into the Army then set off a tidal wave of change that actually sort of jump-started the civil rights movement in the US. I think that the US government, in terms of some of this ageism that we talked about, I'd love to see, for example, as it is, looking at contracts with different service providers, that one of the things they're looking at is, where are you on older adults in your company? Are you retaining them? Are they advancing? What is actually happening? And everything being equal, that the company that has a better record would get that government contract, versus one that did not. Because I think that this is an area where government could lead on having us rethink the value of older adults, and could sort of influence the private sector to kind of come on board with this, because that's where we're going to have to go.
You had an interesting paragraph about pensions, and you said, but with pensions fast becoming a relic of the past and real wages flat or falling for decades, millions of older adults have been too strapped to save. According to the New School Schwartz Center for Economic Policy Analysis, the median retirement savings for middle-income people 55 to 64 is only $60,000 a year. Financing a long life with meager resources to cover even basic expenses is a national problem that looks only to worsen. And we've gone away from defined benefit plans in most companies, with 401k in the United States and defined contribution in Canada. What's the solution?
So I think that we have to, one, allow people the opportunity. They're going to have to work longer. That's going to be one big piece right now.
Not choose to work longer, but have to work longer.
I think have the opportunity to work longer. Right now, people don't have the, and I think, I mean, there are lots of different things. Like right now in the US, Social Security, there's an age that you get it. And let's say you wanted to, what if we were able to use our Social Security maybe 15 years earlier to start a business, or rethinking all of the things that we have routinely done that were related to when life expectancy was only, early 70s. I think we have to just revisit all of it. I'm not an expert on the retirement system. I think there are certainly initiatives now where they're not so much dealing with where older adults have landed. They're trying to create a secure future for younger people by, forcing people to save or giving them an opportunity to save or have vehicles for them to save earlier. But we are where we are. And so I'm looking at the financial precarity that is really real now. We talked about a little bit about my focus on housing in particular.
Yeah.
Because housing for so many is the largest household expense. And what people say to me is, I'm in this precarious situation, but if I have my housing together, I think I could extreme coupon it the rest of the way. So what I look at when I look at, there are lots of problems here. What I'm particularly interested in and focusing on going forward is how can I help on the housing front? And I'm really looking at co-living. In the US, there are lots of co-living opportunities for millennials, but we don't sort of think about older adults who may have limited resources pulling funds together and living together.
Is this sort of like the Golden Girls movie or book, TV show?
Could be, but with men there too.
Okay.
With men there too. And could you, because when you do interviews or you do, they do surveys, everybody says, I want to age at home. That is by far and away the preference.
But they also want the social interaction. They want the activities that come from a lot of those, seniors' homes, homes for the aged, et cetera. Some of those places are wonderful places to stay alive and stay young and stay fit.
But here's what we know about those places, that 54% of older Americans in the US can't afford them. There is a sort of this huge segment of what is called the forgotten middle. These are Americans who not have struggled their whole life and who are having a really rough go of it in old age. These are librarians, teachers, social workers who have not set aside $2 million to maintain their standard of living for 25 years. They make too much to be eligible for any government programs, but they don't have enough to afford the traditional senior housing options.
You wrote about this in another article. A powerful way to keep retirees out of poverty is to tackle this workplace problem, and it has nothing to do with retirement accounts. And you're talking about age bias and your statistics. You talked about the statistic about 50% of the people in their 50s will lose their job, and only 10% will get hired. But then it goes on, which is kind of scary. And you're talking about that a lot of these people, 50% of them, won't have enough money to live on by the time they're 65.
So can we pool resources? Can we, I'm designing now affordable co-living spaces for older adults. I was telling you that I was, thrilled 18 months ago to join a venture studio, and that's what I am working on. Because even though people, yes, they want to live in their houses, the truth is in the US, only 4% of houses have the kind of sort of age-friendly features that would allow people to live there comfortably and safely. So yeah, they may want to live at home, but they can't get the steps. They don't have a bathroom on the first floor, etc. So if they can't age at home, can they age in community? And that's what I am now working on, to see if I can be part of that solution.
Excellent. And is this just in Washington, D.C., where you live, or is it across the country, or what?
My goal is to have these across the country. I would like to start in DC or possibly the Atlanta market. That's where my, what my funders, financiers are interested in. But I'm wanting to do the first prototypes in this sort of DC metro area, and to get all the learning out of that.
And what's the key to this? Is it you commented about you had the primary bedroom, and then two small kiddie rooms. Is it what, having a couple of primary bedrooms?
So I am there's sort of two models I'm focusing on. The one that I actually love the most is working with a developer where I have two floors in a multifamily building. Because what older people say to me is, I don't want to be stuck in a island of old people. I am vital, and I want to still be in the mix. So what it is that there is a suite that has 5 private quarters. Each of the quarters has a sleeping area, sitting area, kitchenette, and ensuite bathroom that opens up into a common area that is big enough to host, if you wanted to do theater night or do a big dinner, it has a larger kitchen. So you would have 5 individuals who would live in that suite.
Sounds like dorm rooms when you were a student.
So, dorm rooms are sort of bedrooms. And I've had, when I'm working sometimes with my real estate guy, he was initially pushing me to do dorm rooms. When you get to be in your late 50s and 60s and have lived alone or in a family, maybe what I'm focusing on, they're called solo agers. So these are people who are late 50s, early 70s, who are single, may be divorced, maybe never married, maybe widowed, may even have adult children, but those adult children are in no position to help them. That's who I'm focusing on. Right. And those people don't want to be in a dorm. They've had
Understood.
lives. And so I have worked on how do I get this to pencil with these private quarters and these sort of common area suite. And so I'm looking at both doing buildings where would be the whole building, all the floors would have that. But also trying to be responsive. From what I'm hearing from the market is I want to be around people of all ages. So looking at intergenerational or multifamily buildings as well.
So it's interesting. There's a trend. I'm not sure if it's a huge trend, but a trend in assisted living places where they'll have assisted living and memory care facilities. But beside that will be an independent living facility, and beside that will be a multi-generational facility. And one of the biggest challenges of assisted living facilities is getting workers and those workers getting housing and living close by. And so therefore having something where you can have a multi-generational housing, a independent living housing, and then the assisted living there locally available that has the programs, the meals, the fitness, et cetera, is a trend that seems to make sense, so that people can move to a facility when they're in their 50s or 60s. And while they may not stay in the exact same facility their whole life, it'll be in the similar vicinity. Do you think that makes any sense?
Yeah, and I think that is sort of part of an older model. What I am interested in is giving people an invitation to make healthier choices, to maybe not end up in assisted living.
So what's the benefit of the co-living space? Is it that you've got shared living rooms and so that your housing expense is less than it otherwise would be? Or is it that you've got people close by that can help you stay independent longer?
So it is both on the affordability. That's a big focus given, all that we've talked about up to this point. But we also know that there is a crisis of isolation and loneliness.
Yep.
And so this is a way. I want somebody to knock on my door if I haven't been seen in a day and a half. I want to be able to wander into the common area and talk to somebody if, if I choose that. But I also want to be able to have the private space that I'm used to having. So I think we need new housing models, new housing typologies for this new way that we're going to be living. And I think I'm focused on older adults aging alone, but I believe the model that I am developing will be suitable for other things like workforce housing, et cetera. I think that's down the road. I'm, focusing on sort of the audience that responded to my book.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to hearing about your progress about these developments. Maybe connect up with us when you've got that development ready to go, and I'd love to come visit it. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in 2 minutes with Elizabeth White and some concluding comments on her really interesting book about being 55 and being underemployed and trying to fake it. And this demographic shift, not tsunami, but this demographic shift that Elizabeth's talked about, and what we're going to do about it. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's wonderful to check in with Elizabeth White, a classmate of mine from business school, who's written a really interesting book about being 55, underemployed, and faking it. And she's written numerous different articles on this topic. And one of them was really kind of interesting because what it did is it talked about 50% of the workers that are over the age of 55 will be poor or near poor when they reach 65. 55%. Like that's an incredible amount. And I really appreciate, Elizabeth, you reading from this book and writing the book and publicizing this issue. Where can people get the book? Can you hold it up and tell people where they can get it, please?
You can get it at your bookstore. You can definitely get it on Amazon as well, Barnes and Noble, etc.
Why, given this, that 50% of people over the age of 55, when they reach 65, are going to be poor or near poor, why are they faking it?
Because this is, I think, not commonly known. I think people, if I had one message, the shame that people feel because they have landed here, because they have no idea how many millions of people are actually here. And that shame turns into silence and not sort of rattling the cage of our legislators or politicians to begin to address this. It means then it doesn't get the attention that it needs. We need to be demanding that this paradigm shift, this demographic paradigm shift, and all of the implications, that we start looking at this. And we start looking at it not, in a 2-year or a 4-year cycle, that we look at this in a 25, 30, 40-year cycle. And as long as there is the shame, the pretending we're okay when we're not okay, I've gotten really good at it now. Because here's the thing. If you look at your friendship circle, I guarantee you know somebody close in who used to be doing well and now they're not. And you know it from what I read there. They're suddenly ordering mineral water instead of Chardonnay. They're declining invitations. You see them, they look a little bit long on getting a haircut or a little bit worn down at the heels. You will not have, your audience will not have to read about this in the New York Times. They right now, there's so many people who've landed here. They right now know somebody who is in this situation. As long as it is shrouded in shame, as long as, rugged individualism, everyone is successful, everybody's putting their best face forward, everyone's pretending they're okay when they're not, then the kind of pressure that needs to be put on our institutions to begin to address this does not happen. And that's a mindset shift. So I'm wanting your audience to, that sister-in-law that they know has landed here, their husband who's been struggling and long-term unemployed or is underemployed, to know there are millions of people who have landed here. And that when we're getting ready to go into an election cycle, that we start asking this question: what is your policy on plus 50 demographic? What, asking some of these questions that you're asking me. And the shame of it, the pretending, the no one wants to mention it, actually hurts a lot of people. And that was the purpose of writing the book. It was to bring attention to what is a very large issue that I think is not getting the attention that it needs to.
Well, I think you've raised a lot of issues, and one of them is ageism. One of them is this hidden poor, and that we need to recognize it. Another is this coming demographic shift that we need to figure about housing and pensions and healthcare and long-term support. And then, you also touched on the social aspect that you need to have people that check in on you and people that you can associate with. And, that old line about you don't get old when you stop dancing. You don't stop dancing when you get old. You get old when you stop dancing. And so, keeping active, whether it's dancing or playing bridge or interacting with people or doing things or going out for dinners, is critically important to keeping alive and keeping well. So, Diane, Elizabeth, thank you so much for the book, and thank you so much for joining us today.
No, it's been wonderful. Great to catch up with you as always. And I've enjoyed this conversation. Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you at reunion. That's our show, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I remind you I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Washington, D.C. at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody. Thanks.